The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
When I think of my new friend Tollisha Joseph, I just get a smile on my face. My new friend from Florida has boundless energy, an appetite for meaningful conversation, and a kindness and a connection that comes from her core. Tollisha teaches founders and CEOs how to master the art of networking and to get on the yes side of their business. She shows them how effective networking can increase their value, potential, and visibility, which increases their earnings. Her work to develop networking and revenue strategies is her passion. And for the last 10 years, she has been working as a networking strategist. She has created ways for leaders to create and send out the right messages and the words that will stick through her company called The Official Glue. Over the last few months, we have collaborated on various platforms, co-hosted conversations about connections, and we're so looking forward to growing together. Tollisha believes true connection is wrapped in a sense of authenticity and intimacy, and it is a two-way street, whether that's in building our teams or our network as we look to grow. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of The Connector Next Door. And what I truly love about The Connector Next Door is that we're talking about worldwide neighbors. And Tollisha, you're here with me today as one of my worldwide neighbors. You are coming to us from Florida, where we are here in Canada, and literally we've got snow falling today. So we're looking at winter coming up. What's the weather like there for you? So glad you're here.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. And outside, it is bright. It is kind of hot, and Florida is so humid. So we're still dealing with summer elements. We only get maybe a good month of cold weather, and it's only cold for a quarter of the day. So we really are not suited for any kind of other ailments of the weather. So
the snow
I
ailments.
would love to be in Canada where it's snowing and you get to see the changes of the seasons and all that stuff. So we kind of are fakers here. We fake our seasons hard and heavy in Florida.
Well, your holiday is coming up. I know I have never, well, I shouldn't say that. I did spend a Christmas in Texas, and that was a completely different experience where we really don't have the skiing and the snow and the cold, and you brace yourself for it. Here in Calgary, we actually have something called Chinooks. So it warms up. It'll get cold, but then everything will melt for a day or two, and then we'll get more snow. So I grew up where it was 30 or 40 below Celsius for months on end. So this is a treat here in Calgary.
That's awesome. It sounds like Denver, because Denver's kind of like that too. It's like snows in the springtime or something.
Totally. We've met only virtually over this last few months. And the beauty of connection through COVID, I'll say, is that it has opened so many great doors to meet people like you that are natural connectors. You are the ones that are out there in your communities. And I watch your Facebook and Instagram lives. The people that you're chatting with are also connectors. And maybe that's what I love about our conversations is that we're meeting at that point where we both see the value of that. And we both are coming at it differently. I know that you had mentioned to me once, every introvert needs an extrovert. But as we get into this conversation today, I love that we can be connectors no matter how we show up or what our personalities are like. And you've shown that to me over and over again as somebody that is an extrovert in your work, in your life. but you are looking for ways to bring people together and have different voices at the table. And I absolutely love that. Do you want to share a little bit about maybe what you're doing today, the context of you as the official glue, and then we'll jump into what does connection mean to you?
Awesome. Yes. So for those who have not come in contact with me yet, my name is Tollisha Joseph, and I am a networking strategist. So what I do is I teach people how to optimize their networking for their ultimate potential and how to be a master of that craft. So really, I'm doing a lot of things, honestly, and it's so crazy that you're in Calgary, because I'm going to be doing a live later on today with someone who's from Canada as well. So I feel like I'm being drawn to connect to Canada. I probably have to go there at some point. I know
we'll take you skiing or something over here someday.
And I love what you said about COVID, and I ultimately believe that COVID was the gift to humanity, because we get to connect with people that we never would connect with otherwise. Like, I would not know who you are, because sometimes we're just so stuck in our own local boxes that we don't see and explore all of the other opportunities that are out there. So I do believe that COVID, although it's reaping havoc, but it also has some good to it. And the goodness that comes out of it is the broadening of that connection.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about connection, and I think I've said this on a couple of other episodes, but it has surprised me, something that I felt like was so innate for me and such a simple conversation. But every time I talk to somebody on this podcast, it's like you're bringing something, everyone's bringing something to what the word connection means. And it has become so rich. I would love to hear from you. Like, what does connection mean to you? You're coming to this as a professional connector, but I would guess this is something that has been part of your life. What does connection mean to you?
I believe that, so I network, and I do believe that there's a big difference between networking and connecting. And so in connection, I believe that there's a more intimate space that is there. It's a more intimate experience. And I don't believe that we connect with everybody. I think we connect with the people that we need to connect with, the people that are innately drawn to us for that intimacy that we could provide. And I believe that every human has an intimate part of themselves that someone else needs. And we all are obligated to make those intimate connections in that way, because if we don't do this, we're depriving somebody of what they actually need. So I know earlier in our pre-conversation, you said I said to you before that every extrovert needs an introvert and vice versa. And that's in networking. But in human connection, every person needs a person. And we all need someone because we need that intimacy. That is part of being a human, having that intimate relationship with someone else and being able to share the deepest, most vulnerable moments of ourselves with someone else in a judgment-free zone. That to me is true connection.
Intimacy, I think sometimes the word itself can be scary, because if you have, for myself, kind of growing up in more sales functions and marketing functions, I always had trouble when I would go to different networking events, and then people felt like they were my best friend. And then I was like, whoa, wait a second. What happened there? I think the difference in what you're saying here is every person needs a person, but for us to really find the intimate parts of ourselves. So I might have been a great listener, but was I truly sharing of myself? And was that connection just a one-way connection? When we really can get intimate and vulnerable about who we are, those are lifers. Those are people that I feel like will be around for a long time because they've seen something and they'll hold it carefully.
Yeah, that's personal value. You know, that's what you just described to me is personal value. That is when you become so valuable to someone, it's personal. And it's taken very seriously. It's almost, I mean, at the epitome of that, it's marriage, right? And if we talk about marriage, I believe that marriage is a covenant, but it doesn't only apply to a husband and a wife. It applies to friendship. It's relationship. And when you take relationship personally, that is when the intimacy really, really happens, because that value exchange is there. I deem you to be a valuable human, and you deem me to be a valuable human. And we are adding value to one another, and that we can have that intimacy, and we don't have judgments. So that's connection for me, genuine, real connection. And that's why networking is part of, is my business, because we have to understand that that's not for everybody. That type of intimacy does not apply to all people. There wasn't that value exchange that was happening in this relationship,
Yeah. And what's very interesting about that is I thought I was serving them better by asking more questions and keeping myself out of the equation. I thought that was actually a kinder way to do business. And when I started to realize that who I was surrounded by, and I'll talk in business, but who I was surrounded by, really, it felt like there was this imbalance. And I think when we talk about what you're talking about, that intimate connection, I think you did a post the other day. You have had an anniversary just recently with your husband. And I loved how you broke that down. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that relationship is like for you and why that matters so much to you. I think in any relationship, for us to really see that there can be this balance and it doesn't all happen at once. It's not like you just sort of unload everything on somebody, but if you're truly asking for intimacy from somebody, to be willing to go there and offer it yourself. And how I've now noticed late in my years that I've now noticed how much richer and not just that it's a balanced relationship. I'm reading a book called Give and Take. And so it's not so much that it's, you give me this and I'll give you this and you give me this. Like it's not that. It really is about both leaning in and both being available to that person. So I love what you're saying about intimacy in that, and what an opportunity for all of us to do that a little more carefully with the people in our lives. Yeah,
exactly. And it's crazy that you mentioned the post, because the title of the post was "Marriage is a Piece of Cake." It's kind of one of the most popular ones I got so far, but the idea in that post was the sweetness of marriage and how it is a piece of cake if you're okay with the salt, right? Because even cake has salt. Even the sweetest things still have a little salt in them. And understanding that it's not always going to be sweet, but the salt kind of is folded in the mix. It's part of the system. It's the way that cake is formed. And even in cake, right, the salt is hidden in the butter, right? So it's literally those smooth and rough patches that you have to be okay with to make that intimacy and that relationship kind of work. So that's what the post was about, just saying,
I love that.
Everyone says, oh, marriage is so hard. It's so hard. Relationship is so hard. Connecting with people is so hard. Networking is so hard. All of these things are so hard. They are a piece of cake if you are okay with the salt.
Right. And so do you find that when people say to you connecting is hard, and sort of taking that into your professional realm, do you find that sometimes you have to help people understand what that actually looks like? Like if they haven't done that effectively in the past, where they felt that true connection, either in their work or in their teams, like we work with a lot of in-house teams and volunteer teams, whether you're a committee, and sometimes that is a big part of the challenge, is that they're not connecting well. They're not hearing each other. They're not being vulnerable. They're not, like you say, sort of the intimacy that's needed to do, I think, big things, and allowing yourself to maybe to feel a little raw, because there are teams that they've maybe been together a long, long time, and they have created patterns over time where they're doing the work, but they're really not connected. How would you help somebody see maybe in their work life how that intimacy can, when you say marriage is sweet, I actually feel like event planning teams can be sweet too, but what would that even look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really getting down and breaking down the ingredients, right? And understanding each ingredient and what its purpose is. You have to start with what your needs are. As the business owner or the leader of the team, you have to identify what the needs are. Because if you don't know what the needs are, then you cannot communicate that well throughout the team. So that's where the dissatisfaction happens, because the communication wasn't good. We didn't break down the ingredients and the purpose of those ingredients, including the salt, right? So there will be times where things are not going as planned. Everything is not going sweet. There's going to be moments where situations are like crazy and we just going to have to come together, right? It's binding those ingredients and making them purposeful, right? And even in the formula of cooking, it's the same thing. It's the binding of the ingredients. Each ingredient has its own purpose within the cake, right? So
Yes.
when you're developing a team, understanding what the team needs. So you start, it's reverse engineering your team strategy. If you understand what your needs are for your business, when you develop your business, you're going to get the proper ingredients. You're going to get the people and put them in the place for the purpose that you need to make the cake sweet. You add a little bit of salt, because there's always that one person in the group that's just always like the negative Nancy. We can't avoid that, but that is good, because honestly, it keeps all the other ingredients active. It really keeps them on
beautiful.
their toes. It keeps them thinking. It keeps the creative juices flowing. You need somebody who's going to challenge the ingredients and make them work harder, honestly. So you need a little bit of salt.
And what you're talking about, that the binding of the green ingredients coming together to do that binding, is going to grow into something bigger. So that's, I think, the cool thing when we talk about events or these connecting points, that there's a binding for a reason, that the cake is going to be baked and we'll have
be a wedding or go for a birthday party or possibly an anniversary celebration. But there's a purpose why we're all here doing this. So that we can make a beautiful cake, right? That's the point.
I love it. Well, and one of
the aggravation, right? That little bit of salt, that one person that's challenging in the mix is there for a reason as well. And
exactly.
Why? Because if we didn't add the salt, there would be an imbalance in flavor.
And if we were to be honest, sometimes we are the salt, right?
Yeah.
Like we might be that person where everyone's like, we would be really great if, Lisa would kind of just back off a little bit and let us do the work. There's I think that beauty of really, that's what community is. You don't necessarily get to choose who your neighbors are or what, even on your team, you might be part of a team, but this is the team. So now you've got to work that out. Sometimes we might want to add a little bit of salt in our other connections, where that actually is part of really the process, that if we can allow ourselves to go there and say that it's both ends, that's such a cool way of looking at it. I would guess that you, as a young Tollisha, you would have been showing up, helping people to communicate better with each other, maybe bringing people together, maybe energizing a group. Tell us a little bit about when you were younger and how that maybe has been showing up for you in your past.
I think that my past has created my present version. Right? It's not how I'm showing up. It's when I realize that this is how I am showing up. Right?
Yeah,
it's that realization of, you've been showing up like this your whole life, and wow, I've been showing up like this my whole life. And I think currently I realize that I've been this version of myself even when I was 6. Even when I was a young woman, right? But I didn't evolve in it. I didn't really take it personally, right? I didn't think that this was my personal value. I kind of disassociated with it.
Did
And
you,
so
was that because you didn't think it was positive, or you just didn't see it in yourself, or why would you kind of just push it to the side a little?
I do think that, and crazy that you asked that, because the conversation this morning is kind of just fouling back into this. But I had a conversation this morning and we were talking about gifts. And I do think that part of that is when I was a young one, you know, my voice is my gift. It really is. I have the gift of speaking to people in a way that they can easily understand what it is that I'm saying without too much complication. Like I'm fluid in my speech. And when I was a kid, I was fluid in my speech too. I love to talk. Like that is something that I love to do. It just comes out of me in a conversations forever. And when I was a child, people would say, "You talk too much. Like you do this too much." So it was stifled, right? And
Interesting.
now that I am evolving into this business phenom, I'm going to say it because I believe it, right? Right? I realized that the thing that was stifled as a child is the thing that needs to have more life. It needs more life. You know, we can't keep it quiet. It's something that has to be done. And it's the evolution. You evolve into the person. It's not who were you, because you don't change. And if we really do pay attention and be intentional about who we were when we were 7 or 6, and how we're evolving into, we will see some of the characteristics that are current today, probably louder than they were then, that are making an appearance now. They're like, really, like, say I'm the star of the show, right? And
yeah,
it's okay to do that. And when I am talking to my clients, that is something that I tell them to do. Who were you when you were 7? How did you make friends then?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Like I said, people say connection is so hard. And it's because we've complicated it in the evolution instead of kept it light and simple and easy, and really found the fun and joy in connecting and making friends and just having conversation. We've been doing this from the time we were born, really.
Well, and when you're talking about when we were 7, and when you're saying that this can be natural and easy, and the way you do it, Tollisha, might not be easy for me to do it the way you do it. Yeah. But if we go back to how we naturally, each of us individually, naturally show up and have been showing up. I was listening to a talk I had given a bunch of years ago, and talking about myself when I moved cities when I was 12, and how important my friends were at the time. And it reminded me, it was that feeling like I was creating connections back then, and maybe I was very quiet about it, sort of in a certain way, kind of quiet about it, but it was still very active. And so when you talk about it being easy, and I think you'd be the last one to say you have to do it like me, do it like Tollisha, and you've got it. You're saying, show up as yourself, show up the way that you naturally would. And that's what makes it fun, easy, and we're able to actually build it into something that now is positive for us as we move forward.
When you start to pay attention to the habits, that is when you can start to develop the skill, right? And really amplifying those habits that you were doing when you were 7, like, your introduction. When you were 7, you probably were just the one who jumped in and said, "Oh my God, hi, I'm me." And now you could probably control it a little better, have a little more subtlety to it, and make it effective, that introduction. So it's not, everybody is not going to do it the same. We can't, that cannot be a requirement of networking or connecting, that we all do it the same way, because if we did, we're breaking it. We're literally breaking it. But if we really hone in to our more free self, then we will find the joy of really connecting, and the joy of curiosity, and the joy of interest. Like, there is so much joy in this activity, but I think it's lost because we're clouding it with all the business side. We have to do it this way. The box of business is really breaking connection.
what would our world look like? Like, it just feels like if everybody was leaning into who they truly are, refining it, like what you said. So I'd love to hear an example from you, but we'll get there in a second. But when we're refining that, where now it becomes this positive forward motion, momentum building kind of way of living. And I believe that my life as an entrepreneur, so much of it is blurred. Like my friends and my family and my work and clients, there's a lot of back and forth between all of them. So I really love the idea of being able to lean in, like you're saying, and add more of that intimacy, which might feel a little bit like salt sometimes, but that leads us to a great place of connection.
I will use myself as an example on how the refining really works, because I could say, man, when I was in my teens, maybe in my 20s, I was not really thoughtful with my words. I was really not, I would just say whatever came to my mind and not really putting much thought about how it affected others and how my words have so much impact. But remember, I'm a talker. I love to talk, but it was an uncontrolled container. It had no bounds, no boundaries, no control. No, it was not refined at all. It was just very fiery. And when I started to refine it and pay more attention to what I'm saying, it piqued me to be more interested in vocabulary.
Interesting.
And understanding words and what they truly mean. So that when I'm talking now, I'm really speaking with knowledge, and I have absolute understanding of what I'm saying majority of the time. Refinery,
Right.
which helps me communicate better. So I'm able to communicate with more people because I have a larger vocabulary. I have a larger understanding of words. I can really manipulate words in a way that makes it easy for you to understand. So I've refined my language to make my connections better, honestly. So that is that refinery moment where whatever it is, that style of which you're doing, that thing that you've been doing since you were 7, I've been talking my whole life, and really just talking to everybody, my whole life, but talking without purpose. I had no purpose. My ingredient was purposeless. Now they are very contained. I know when my voice is necessary. I know when it is not. I know when to be silent. I know when to speak up. I have really good control over my voice.
I'm so curious, and you don't have to share anything that you don't want to share, obviously. But not everybody gets to that tipping point. Not everyone gets to that understanding of themselves where they're like, I'm talking a lot. It is my gift to talk a lot. People have been telling me I talk too much, whatever it is, in your background. What was that tipping point for you where you said, I'm going to get more intentional about learning how to use my voice, how to learn about the words? I love this conversation. I believe so strongly in the power of words. So I'm so curious, kind of, was there something specific that you were like, there needs to be a shift, or did it just slowly happen over time?
No, I think the revelation of, whoa, that thing was when I decided that I wanted to do something different. And I started to understand, like, what I'm doing now just isn't fulfilling me. It's not satisfying.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not happy with what I'm doing. And although I am using this thing, it doesn't feel like it's purposeful. And my eggs don't have a container. Like, what am I doing? And when I started to think about, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I had to go back. I had to go into my 6-year-old self, and I started writing out, like, my life, just as I remember it up until the time from the earliest that I can remember it. And when I started to see the consistency of your voice, that is the thing. That's the thing that you need to do. Your voice and your connections. I have lifelong friends that I've had since kindergarten. How do you do that? How do you make that thing happen? How do you create these intimate relationships that can last over 20 years? How do you do that? It's your voice. Now, if I took that voice and I was very intentional about how I use that thing, it would create something other than this. Like, I would create really good, meaningful, intentional relationships that can last 20 years. So we're not just friends that we've been together for 20 years because, you'll talk to me, but we're friends because we have that intimate relationship. And when we get together to talk, we're talking on purpose, right? So we're talking about a purpose subject, or we're having purposeful conversations. It's not wasted. It's not wasted ingredients. So that's when I realized communicating is my purpose. It's the thing that I'm supposed to do. And if I use it purposefully, it can create impact. It will.
Yeah. I think when you're talking about your transition, and it was probably early on in your what we call career life, or when you got into your 20s, and now as you are doing this for clients and you're working with people that are really wanting to connect better, wanting to build their business, and networking is something that people love to hate. It's just something that's out there and we've got to show up. Or some people absolutely love it, but they're not getting the results that they think they could get. So we're not necessarily saying in this conversation that everyone has to have your gift of using your voice. But what would you leave with people that are saying, I feel like words need to matter more for me? I feel like and I know you love this topic because we've talked about sticky words, and I have some homework to do in that. But this idea of really, how do you then encourage people to find the voice for their, in our case, we work with a lot of clients, the voice for their event, the voice for this connection or this campaign they're working on. What would you suggest to people as something they could take away today where they're like, oh, I love what Talisha's saying, but I'm not sure how that actually works for me?
Yeah, I think I love this. And I think that the answer to that question is pay attention to the repetitive. Pay attention to the things that you keep saying over and over and over again, because there's some purpose to those things. And finding, it's not the language, it's your language. It's your language. And language is so fluid and everybody has it. We all speak differently. Words even have different meanings to us. It's like emojis, right? Emojis are, you read an emoji, I'm smiling, you're like, well, is she happy? And, we all have these different contexts of which the words mean, but really it's how do those words fit into your constraint, right? So what do the words mean to you? And making sure that you are articulating that with your customers, your clients, your community, your network. That's the thing that needs to live. It's your life and it needs to live within your life, So you have to learn how to communicate what you are doing and what you desire and what you need to others, because we all need different things. And that is what I think the world would be if we truly tapped in to who we really are. We would find a more fulfilling world, a more joyful world, a world filled with less offense, because people are really speaking their truth and sharing their needs more. And it's not this eluded space that we're just kind of trying to figure out the language, because it's very clear and transparent. So that's what I think would be the thing that I can leave you with, is making sure that you pay attention to your own language. And when you realize that you keep saying the same things over and over again, write those things down and then start doing that introscope work of what do these things truly mean? Find the definition of these things that you continuously say, and do those definitions align with your values? And if so, continue to use that language. If not, find another word that really will articulate what you truly need to your audience.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to even the name of your business too. Like when we talk about the glue, and I remember you talking about the glue is kind of sticky and messy, but when it dries, it's got that sheen and it's got that lasting quality. And what you're talking about in really doing the work, I think it is work to pay attention to the words we say and how we speak, and readjust. There's a lot of words that I am removing out of my world right now. Actually, can I share one of them that's on my wall right now?
Sure. Oh, yes.
So for those of you that are just listening to this, I have a little circle that I drew and cut out, and the word on it is guys. And it is not an inclusive word when I am running a workshop. I work with all sorts of men and women, and the idea of choosing our language and being able to readjust and change as needed to really articulate what is important to us, what is the purpose of why we're speaking, and being intentional about that. Thank you so much, Tollisha. I just love this conversation. And I know that when we talk about a more connected world, for everyone, that's going to be a little bit different. But what you were talking about, if we were showing up with intention, if we were all showing up and doing those, maybe it might just be a micro adjustment, or maybe you really do need to have to reinvent how you're speaking to people so that you can truly connect the way you did, coming out of your teens and now being such a master connector, a natural connector, but you're very intentional about your words. You don't just let it happen. It's not by accident that you are where you are. So thank you so much for coming. I will have a lot to think about as I, put this together and get this posted for people to listen to. How can people find you? Where can they continue the conversation with you?
So I am refining the answer to this question. And I am so grateful. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday and we were talking about names. And just a short story, I grew up not really enjoying my name. It was just a battle. I always had to tell people because I don't like nicknames. I don't like shortening up because that's just my personal preference. It's my name, respect it, right? But now I'm finding a lot of joy in this name because you can find me by searching my name. There's not many people with my name, so it's very interesting how the evolution of and how I'm becoming comfortable with something that I really was not very comfortable with as a young girl. So if you want to find me, just type in Tollisha, Tollisha, and more than likely I will pop up under official glue.
That is perfect. And we will make sure to add some links and things for people to get in touch with you. There are so many, I would guess, so many people that need your help, but even more than that, need to see themselves. And how are they communicating? How can they do this better? So thanks so much for the chat.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Lisa. The conversations are always so good. And I'm so grateful that you invited me to share my thoughts with your audience.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.